All right, it's noon, so I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll continue to let people into the room as they come in or as they join the waiting room. I'll take this moment just to introduce Debbie Cohen, and I'll let her say a few words about herself. She's from UT Austin.
Let me pull up my slides and then I will hop in. Okay, can everyone see my slides? Thumbs up. Yes. Okay, so I'm Dr. Deborah Cohen. I am an associate professor at UT Austin. I'm in Dell Medical School in the Department of Psychiatry, and I'm also in the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. And I direct our Center for Youth Mental Health, which is a research center that explicitly focuses on identifying youth and young adults who are at risk for developing serious mental illness. And one of the things that we do is we have a clinical arm, which is called the Amplify Center. And we are in the process of moving from our pilot phase to our public phase. So you'll actually probably start hearing about this in the news soon. But we have a adolescent and young adult specific clinic where we focus on screening older adolescents and young adults to try to help to get them to the right place the first time in Travis County to help with early intervention. So some of this stuff might be a little repetitive for you, depending upon what background you guys have related to mental health. But in December 2021, the Surgeon General issued an interesting advisory that flagged the nation's youth mental health crisis. So for the ones of us who work in this space, this wasn't incredibly surprising. We've been seeing a rise for about the past 10 to 12 years of increasing rates of depression and anxiety among adolescents and young adults. And we've been seeing a steady increase in suicide deaths for 10 to 24-year-olds. So a bit of background on some of this is we find that about 1 in 5 children and youth have some sort of mental health condition. So that can be a whole spectrum of severity. And then individuals who develop a serious mental illness, we find that 75% of that onsets before someone's 25th birthday. So when I'm talking about serious mental illness, I'm talking about like schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression. And so when we're talking about all of this, the big thing that we've noticed in the data is that we're not seeing a huge increase for the most part when it comes to like serious mental illness, like schizophrenia, bipolar, but where we're seeing a huge increase is among like more mild depression and anxiety. And what the data is telling us is a lot of that is connected to how childhood has changed since the addition of a lot of teens having smartphones, being on social media, and the reduction in having a play-based childhood. So this isn't like fully set in stone, but like I would say we're getting pretty clear on the data that I'd say 80 to 90% of us are pretty clear on that. That's what it looks like is the causal relationship here, which is leading to some anxiety and depression. And I'll talk more at the end of my talk about how for our like typical teenagers, what we can do to help to reduce specifically anxiety. So in the space that I work, I think about mental health and mental illness on a continuum. So our goal in the work that we do is trying to implement effective, accessible, youth-friendly services in our community. Because when it's hard to access services, when your illness and needs are simple, when they get much more serious, such as us being concerned about someone hurting themselves, we want to intervene earlier to help people when stuff is not interfering a ton in their life. So what I'm going to talk through today to you guys about is like the 5 big areas that the people I work with, what we always look about observing for the adolescents and young adults that we work with about if this is typical adolescence or if something else is going on. Because what you find during this age group, because you guys are all parents, you're living this, is that there's a ton of changes going on. And sometimes it can be hard to unentangle what is just normal being a teenager and what is something that we should be worried about. And I'm focusing more on how can we be more responsive when these are just early things that we're noticing and we're not at the point of like flashing alarms. Okay, so the first one's personality change. I mean, I don't have high schoolers yet, but I have one who's a tween now, and you notice every time they go through a different developmental change, sometimes there's different parts of their personality that changes, and you have to readjust how you're parenting and responding because maybe they're becoming more introverted, more extroverted, how they want to be approached about things. Everything kind of changes every year or two or every 6 months, depending upon the child, which can be really hard from a parenting perspective. When we think about it in the perspective of mental health, the biggest thing that we're focusing on is like huge, grand personality changes, which really, what's totally normal is the occasional white lie, being increased, being more interested in talking to their friends about what's going on in life and not wanting to tell you everything. Be wanting to like specialize in activities, such as maybe when they're 10, they might be enrolled in like all these different activities on the evenings and weekends, but maybe by the time they're a sophomore, they only just want to do soccer or they just want to do band. That sort of stuff's normal. So like saying that they are deciding that they want to quit some different activities that and being only interested in one thing now is totally normal. It's also completely and utterly normal for them to fail at things and is actually emotionally protective to allow our teenagers to fail. And it actually helps them to be more successful in adulthood when they do that. But it's figuring out how as parents to let them fail in a safe sort of way so that, you're not swooping in immediately, but that there still is that like safe place to land as they're like struggling through the failure. So on the atypical side is that it's just like significant changes in deceitful behavior. If you went from someone who was like had never skipped a class, never did anything, and all of a sudden they're refusing to go to school, they are, running away, things like that. Just huge changes. That's when we start to really concern about the personality changes. Okay. The next one is eating and sleeping too little or too much. It is incredibly normal for a teen to want to sleep more, specifically if they stay up a little too late and then they don't want to sleep the next day. This is all normal. We all went through this. It's also normal for them to have days where they're super hungry or not so hungry. The big thing this always goes back to, as I said, like big sweeping changes. So if you have someone who's just all of a sudden doing a lot of restrictive eating, a lot of compulsive eating, it's becoming really inflexible. On the sleep side, it's like one extreme or the other. It's meaning that they like repeatedly are needing to sleep more than 9 hours a day, every day. Not just because they had one late night that they were up too late, hanging out with friends or studying. It's just like that they cannot seem to catch up. And the other one is on the sleeping too little, is if they are barely sleeping, like 3-4 hours a night or not at all, but you see that they have an incredibly high level of energy. That's a concern. That's something that you want to check in with your pediatrician about or talk to a psychiatrist. Okay. So the next one is feeling unusually confused, on edge, or scared. So as I said in the beginning is we're noticing generally an increased level of anxiety among all teenagers in the Gen Z population. This is something that all of us who work in this space are trying to adjust to and figuring out the best way to respond. And I said some of it has to do with how different societal changes have happened. And we're trying to figure out like how to help to reduce the like anxious personality. The biggest thing is about thinking through like when it's problematic or not, is all of us have moments when we're anxious or worried about something. That's normal. When it's a concern is when we start noticing that it has an impact in our daily life and our ability to accomplish things. So anxiety has three main components. It's emotional, it's physiological, and cognitive. So emotional is like the feeling of fear or dread. We all have that happen from time to time. Then you have the bodily sensations such as like sweating or tightening in your stomach or like your heart speeding up. And then the cognitive is the constant worries or negative thoughts. So like and also thinking about that, there's also the personality component to all this. Some people are more apt to be a worrier and other people aren't, but it's when it could be helpful to reaching out to a mental health professional, specifically someone who can help on this is an area that could be helpful. Therapy is thinking through how to deal with those worries and negative thoughts, specifically if someone anytime they encounter any change whatsoever are always coming up with the worst case scenario every single time, and that is impeding in their ability to move forward in various tasks. Okay, the next one, and so one of the big ones is, so even though this is a very small percentage of our population, one of my expertise is focusing on psychosis and the development of serious mental or schizophrenia. And the one thing we always think about when we're screening for psychosis is that it's normal for an adolescent to experience a fair amount of social conflict. So they can have a kind of level of like social paranoia where they're worried people are talking about them. So if your teen is talking about that, that's normal, that's going to happen. The issue becomes is when it's getting to the point that it might be some sort of internal stimuli that they're experiencing, it's that they're hearing voices that aren't there and they're focusing on it in a way where you're starting to worry this is not like just this social conflict. This is that they are hearing something internal to their head. They're seeing distracted. What they're describing to you does not seem to be someone that they are actually interacting with in real life. Delusions could be something like if someone starts bringing up information to you, such as like being worried that the TV is passing on information to them. All sorts of things. And some of this stuff can be really hard now just based on how deep and dark the internet can be at times, is that people can get down holes of being finding out information that's very conspiracy theory related. So sometimes we have to unentangle that part. So some of it still goes down into the avenue of like, are people seeking out social opportunities where people encouraging some of this conspiracy theory thought, and that's what's going on versus something that is like truly atypical. And this is where, like, if we're worried about it, it's reaching out to a professional help unentangle all of that for you. The next one, which is very, very, very normal, inability to perform daily tasks. And also in a world right now where we're all very distracted because we have all of our devices and we have notifications and everything going off all the time, it's really easy to become distracted. So it can be incredibly normal, and especially now because there's all the input coming on from the computers and phones and everything, of struggling to have the ability to finish their daily tasks. The difference when you notice this goes from like normal teenager to atypical is when you're noticing distinct changes in the items that I listed. So this is like someone does not want to get dressed. They don't want to groom themselves. They are struggling to like perform all the necessary tasks of work and school. It's like that all of a sudden back to like the personality change, that they're unable to do that. And all this stuff is hard because all of our teenagers are doing a lot of things and have a lot of demands in their lives. So it's usually trying to come up with ways to help them organize things, because that is normal part of adolescence. I said it becomes when they're just unable to do and accomplish anything, is that's when we start getting worried. Okay, so what do we do if we notice one of those things is going on with our teenager? These are like the standard big places in town. So obviously Dell Children's is our Texas Child Study Center. That is a wonderful place that you can always reach out to. We also have Integral Care, which covers Travis County. They also are a support. Bluebonnet Trails is for Williamson County. Ascension Seton supports at the adult level if they're over 18. And there's also many other options outside of those. I'm going to go back a couple of things. Okay. So But the one thing, and I realize that this one slide's old. I think I made this one in Encanto was really popular. But I think my main thing is that I always want to point out when I'm talking to parents of teens is that, especially teens today, is they are experiencing a heck of a lot of pressure in every single day. So realizing that it can be like, think of their mental health like checking in with your primary care doctor. It can be very helpful even to just commit to doing like a very short segment of therapy, such as like saying, we're going to do this for a semester, or we're going to do this for 8 sessions or something like that. That sometimes this can be very helpful, especially during that transition period from high school to college, to help them to think through how to deal with all these different demands that they have in their life. So beyond that, I said I was going to give you some other feedback of just generally how we can help our teens be emotionally helpful or emotionally healthy. Here are like the research proven ways that we can help today's teens. So this is based on what Gen Z is experiencing, things that we can do to help to reduce specifically their anxiety. The first one is normalizing failure. And I will tell you this as a college professor, letting our middle school and high schoolers fail, whether it is they tried a class, it didn't work out, they did not get an A, they tried a new activity, it did not go as planned, all sorts of things, that will build a incredibly amount of resilience for them before they go on to college, and they will have a much easier job at adjusting to college and young adulthood, and being like a new person in the professional world. The next one is encouraging your child to figure out their problems without parental involvement. I know this one is hard. We all want to swoop in and fix the things for our kids, but letting them figure out their social conflict on their own, or letting them figure out how to like fix something with a teacher, of them learning to do those skills on their own, is going to help them once they leave the house. The next one, which I'm sure all you guys have been hearing about a lot, is encouraging phone-free time at school, home, and before bedtime. There is a ton of research that's been coming out recently showing with teenagers, if we can, especially at school and before bedtime, if we can get them off the phones and they have a fair amount of time without their phone, that we are showing an incredible reduction in their anxiety. The next one connected to that is encourage in-peer gatherings, even better if they don't play with their phones while they're in person. There is something specific to what I referred to before about this whole play-based childhood, that what we are finding was the biggest difference between millennials and Gen Z generation is that in having in-person peer and gatherings is protective in a way and is helping them to their brain develop. We haven't figured out exactly what the mechanism is, but there's something about it that is helping them to be, we are finding that millennials at this age were much less anxious than Gen Z, and that appears to be what it's all connected to, is it has to do with like their social development that they develop in those in-person peer interactions. The next one, and I talked about this before, is saying normalize stress and mental health needs. And talking about like it's totally normal and fine to say like committing to, even if it's not a big issue, like seeking out a therapist, trying therapy for like a very brief time. And also growing trust between you and your child, so they come to you when they're concerned, or they're concerned about that a friend may need help. You want to be the parent that someone it feels comfortable coming to say, I'm concerned about my friend. She said something to me that scared me that she might hurt herself. Making sure building an environment with our kids or with their social group so that they know that you're a safe place, that they can have those conversations. That is the biggest way that we can reduce suicidality in our high schools. The next one is provide opportunities to take a walk without distractions. The whole thing, if you've ever heard teenagers say the term touch grass, this whole idea like going outside, walking, is finally starting to not be 100 degrees out in Texas. Those sort of things, having a break without devices. I think you're noticing a trend on my comments, is that those things can be really helpful. And the last one is encouraging sleep hygiene. So this goes back to the whole thing about putting the phone away, making sure that they are getting those like 8 hours of sleep every night, figuring out how to balance school and work and everything, but that they are like prioritizing that they are getting the sleep that they need. And my last thing is just always, and if you are looking into therapy, these are a lot of different of the like online versions, because now it's really, really easy to find accessible therapy because there's a ton of different app options. These are other ones that I would say to look into if your teen is looking for someone to talk to. The other thing is ask a friend. A lot of people have a therapist that they like. And that is all I have. So I will open it up to questions. I know it was pretty brief.
You don't want to speak up, you're welcome to put them in the chat. See, are you able to see these, Debbie, or no? Okay.
I can't see anything. I
Okay.
can only see you.
Let me, so one question, so this might, I'll split this one. It says, how is Eanes discussing phones in schools? And then second, what are the benefits of students having them?
I
Eanes has
defer to
some
you.
discussion. Yeah, I mean, there are some discussions going on. I know in the middle schools, they're not allowed, during the school day. Which I'll make a side note here. I've helped out at Hill Country Middle School during lunches several times this year. And it's amazing because not a single kid has a phone. They don't have them. And so just watching them interact with each other face to face is a really beautiful thing. I used to be at the high school and it's a lot of walking around with, watching kids with their phones as they're passing me in the hallways kind of thing. So kind of cool. But Ms. Cohen, if you
Yeah,
have
and
anything you wanted to
we
say
have kids in
about
Round Rock and they just instituted the same rule for the middle schoolers. The middle schoolers, the children were annoyed. The parents were very excited. And so far I'm hearing the same thing as you said, Heidi.
are there benefits that you can think of for students to have their phones, that kind of that social connection piece? Is there some value in that?
Yeah, so one thing that we have found in the research about is that for youth specifically that have more marginalized population or marginalized populations who might not exist in a community like within their school, so maybe their specific identity, there's not as many other kids who they there have that shared identity. And that could be 1,000 different, slices of like what that identity that they're looking for, whether it's disability, LGBTQ, all sorts of things. We found for those youth that they tend to have the most benefit of some like social connection. The thing on for just general youth, what we're finding is phones, the stuff that's the best is still the stuff that's the closest to in-person connection. So like talking on FaceTime, talking on Messenger Kids or regular, like those sort of things, being on Zoom, like talking, like that is this part of technology that's actually been shown to have the best stuff. The stuff that where we're finding the issue is it has to do with asynchronous communication. So if you think about when you're on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, you're commenting and someone else is not having a conversation with you in real time, that is what we're finding in the research is what's causing the disconnect between the social and communication development because they are communicating in a way that's asynchronous without having the opportunity to work through confusion or social conflict in the same ways that earlier generations learned to do that in real time. And they, without doing that, they're not learning some of those social cues or how to interact with other individuals in a way that is helpful for them to meet those developmental stages in young adulthood. And if that doesn't make sense, ask me a follow-up question. But I hope that helps to unentangle like why we're worried. It doesn't mean that it's always bad. It's just saying with this age group, why they struggle with it.
There are a few other questions that have come in, some comments, some thank yous to you for your time, and then a comment that it all comes down to the teens listening to parental advice, that parents can guide them, but generally teens are very, we know it all,
Yes.
which is definitely true. We do have a question here, starting with a comment that, you and others have highlighted the detrimental effects of devices on kids' mental health. How do you discuss screen use with kids or clamp down on screen time? And that I'm going to add a second question that kind of
Yeah.
leads from that. The second question is, do you have any recommendations regarding screen time maximums, limitations for some apps, or limits by parents in general
Now,
for their older high school age
it,
kids?
it's harder for you guys because I'm saying that I am very happy that my oldest is 10. So like I learned all this stuff and you guys are like in the fire of it. So like so I think what's hardest, what we're finding when implementing these things is like, how do we go back? Because the thing is that like for the ones that are getting used ready for middle school, there's like, as we just said, like we're having a lot of discussions in all of our districts about how do we plan for when they hit sixth grade and how we're going to do that within our households, with the teachers and everything like that. You guys have kids that are already past there, and I don't mean to be like dismissive of it. I'm just saying it's just harder to pull back. I think it's individual households and parents, and also I would encourage within parent groups. So if you are friends with the other moms and dads within your kids' friends groups, thinking through with them about like what you're going to commit to. So, like, as I said, I have a kiddo who's in fourth grade now. So, like, there's a group of other moms with me. Like, we've been starting to make a plan towards middle school of like what we're going to let them do and not do. And we're doing it as a social unit. So, like, it's not just my kid complaining that, like, well, my mom won't let me do that. It's that, well, all of their friends they're hanging out with are experiencing the same guidelines. And, like, there's a bit of a social, like, conversation that you have about that. Different households are going to have different rules, but we're trying to take it that we have like 5 or 6 of us that are like trying to come up with like a joint plan, and that all of that friend group is going to experience the same thing. So that would be one thing that I would suggest. I don't want to set limits of like saying, like you can only have 2 hours a day or whatever it is. I think all of us have our own problems as adults with using our devices too much, but trying to figure out like times. Like one thing you could try is like, if you're able to, having a family meal, whether that is every night or that's just Sunday or something like that, and having no devices during that time. Like that's an easy one you can start with, is just saying like, here's like a specific time that we're gonna like put all the devices in the drawers. And the other thing about is like when they go upstairs at night, another easy one is saying that like the devices have to stay downstairs like after 10 p.m. or something. Like they stay in the drawer, they can't be up in your room at night. Like some of those sort of things that will help with their sleep hygiene. But like I'm owning the fact that you guys are like in a really hard space because we like kind of just figured this out in the last year or so. And it's being thrust upon you now to have this extra parental worry.
We do have someone asking if you have any suggestions for someone in the community who might be able to support parents who are parenting teens who are autistic and, exhibiting some of these typical teen disrespectful behaviors.
So how about I get back to you on that of like,
Yep.
figuring out like what's the best resource. So it also kind of depends upon like what specifically you're looking for. Cause there's so
Okay.
you're clarifying, like, so you're looking for parent support from like other parents that are experiencing that?
So the specific wording was, and the person who wrote this, if you want to be more clear, you're welcome to. Nobody else can see it but me. It says she's requesting recommendations for parenting counselors or counselors who could assist with teenage disrespectfulness combined with autism and how to
Yeah.
help that.
No,
Okay.
I feel you on, yes.
Okay.
It's especially when they have that like Asperger's sort of presentation that it's like there. Um
Yeah.
uh Yes, I
Ideally,
hear you
someone
on
who
it.
can maybe work with both the parent and the
Yeah,
child.
I know of a couple of I know of a couple of resources that are,
Okay.
I know
And you can
of
get
one
back to me and I
practice I
can,
really like, West, that's West. I can send some follow-up names to you
okay.
guys.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I can make sure that person gets it. There was also a comment
Yeah.
here saying that they have a high school student. He's definitely following apps and such, but as a high school parent, we've been so blessed that our kids had no interest in social media like Facebook. So they're very thankful, but still have other challenges, but not that specific one, which is nice.
As a boy
Any
mom,
other
it's all weird to when I talk to some of my friends that the difference when you see the girl household versus the boy household.
Yeah, that can be tough.
I
I have
will
nephews.
also I will also add with that is on the whole like social media concerns, we're finding there are very different gendered behaviors. So the girls are finding what they're following online is specifically making them more anxious versus boys more concerning behavior has to do with if they're seeking out areas of the internet that maybe we don't want them to be seeking out, specifically as I was talking about like conspiracy theories and stuff like that, like seeking out um social connection and those sort of parts. So we're seeing different behavior and there's a gendered component to it.
That makes sense. And another question came in, how do we encourage kids to go for therapy if they don't want to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I'm a big advocate for saying like, you know, you do have some free choice in it, especially once they're over 18. I mean, the thing I would say, always trying to encourage to say you can try something once and then you can quit. That's one of the things I do like about, or like making that negotiation to say, like, let's just try it once. Or the other one I've had someone else say is like, you have to do everything twice before you tell me you don't like it. Sometimes that's another way to deal with young adults because we actually do find with this age group that if they show up twice to an appointment, they're more likely to stick around. Um, so they so something like BetterHelp, Talkspace, a lot of those things like literally let you just like, I don't like this person, I want to try someone else. So like that's also an option of something. So if they don't feel like a connection, and then also just reach out this person if you want to connect me that I would say we can always try to see if we can connect them to our center because we do a lot of like really young adult like friendly sort of stuff and always more than willing to be a soft place for people to land because I have a lot of cool staff that and our young adults love us or adolescents who work with us. And they say we're not annoying like everyone else they've talked to. I'm not one of the providers. My providers are much cooler than I am.
That's fun. Any other questions? I'm dropping a link that everyone should be able to see in the chat. This is where at some point we will have the recordings and such from the speaker series this week posted. Definitely give us some time to get that done. So thank you to Debbie Cohen for giving up her time with us today. And a big thanks to, oh, we have another question here. How does someone get connected with the Amplify Center?
Yeah, I would give you my email.
Okay.
So if you guys want to reach out, so I said we are in the process of moving to going under 18. We're doing it in the next month. So if you guys reach out, it just might be a little bit if your kids are under 18 right now. But we're more than willing to talk to you guys and figure out how we can support. We only provide, so just as a clarification, under 18, we only provide non-traditional services, so like peer support, supported employment, care navigation. So like peer support can be really helpful for this age group, having someone to talk to that's gone through it. We only provide our traditional services to over 18-year-olds. So like therapy and psychiatry. If someone needs therapy or psychiatry, then we connect them to our partners at Dell Children's. So just giving you that bit of I don't know, extra information. We're in the process of expanding. We don't have enough people yet to meet everyone's needs in the county.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. A big thank you to Westlake school-based therapists, Katie Bryant and Brooke Anderson. They put together the speaker series and all the activities taking place at Westlake this week for Be Kind to Your Mind Week. Those of you who wish to, you're welcome to stay online for our next session that will begin at 12:45. And the rest of you, I hope you have a wonderful day and tune in next week, or tomorrow, excuse me. Tomorrow is the last day, it's Friday. You're getting a lot of thank yous, Debbie, in the chat as well.
Well,
So
thank you guys so much. And you have my email. Feel free to reach out.
thank you.
I will try to be responsive. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I think in the interest of time, we can go ahead and get started. I'll continue to admit people into the session. And Eames families, thank you for joining. I'm Heidi Sauer, Director of Counseling, and we have Betsy Ezel here with us today, and I'll let her say a few words about herself as introduction.
Great. Hi, good afternoon. It's so good to be here with you all. I'm going to share my screen. My name's Betsy. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Austin, and I'm one of the lead therapists of one of our Heritage Counseling and Consulting. We're an outpatient counseling office. We're pretty new to Austin, so we opened here in Austin a little over a year ago, but have been in Dallas for about 20 years. And excited to be with you guys. We love being in Westlake. I love being in Westlake. Okay, so let's get started. I'm just going to talk a little bit about identifying and responding to mental health concerns in adolescents. Working with adolescents has been the primary focus of most of my career. So I've worked in outpatient settings, just like one-on-one counseling, but then also in residential treatment for adolescents and also in day treatment for adolescents. Done a lot of work with kids all across the spectrum of behavioral health, some with really risky behaviors that are not safe to be in the community, all the way down to pretty regular kids struggling with kind of more normal presentation of depression and anxiety. So let's get started. First, I think it's important to talk about just like identifying what depression can look like in kids. When we talk about mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, self-harm are at the top of our list for risks for kids and adolescents. Most commonly, there's a pretty varied symptom presentation for depression, but most commonly, these are the things that we're really going to be looking out for. Initially, and typically first, we see a fairly significant withdrawal in kids. So we see withdrawal from their hobbies, withdrawal from social situations. We see them kind of pull back out of things that they typically would have enjoyed. This can look a lot of different ways. So sometimes that means that they don't want to leave the house. They don't want to engage in the sports or activities that they've been active in. They don't want to be a part of family gatherings. They don't want to engage at all. That would be a fairly significant withdrawal. What we can also notice is maybe they don't stop doing those things. Maybe they'll go, but they stop engaging. So they're not talking with their peers. They're not actively participating with the leaders of certain events. They become more observant instead of actively engaging. There's a lot less like active socializing happening. So sometimes that means they don't want to be with their friends, but other times it looks like they're still with their friends, but they're not sharing with their friends. They're not talking to their friends. They're not as actively a part of the group. We also look for emotional changes, so sad or crying more often, feeling more down, more statements or thoughts about their inabilities, their shortcomings, the things that they can't do or won't be able to do. We tend to hear a lot of self-esteem changes. We hear shifts in their beliefs about their connection with their most trusted relationships. A fairly significant emotional shift can happen. It can start pretty mild, but as depression intensifies or grows, we see usually an increase in these particular emotional presentations. Also, really commonly, we see changes in appetite, sleep, or appearance. And these can all really vary in significance, but When there's a dramatic shift in either under eating or overeating, we like to pay a fair amount of attention to that. Sleep can either significantly increase where adolescents, teens especially, maybe don't want to get out of bed. It's hard to get them to sleep like a normal hour range. They don't want to wake up in the morning. They don't want to go to school. They're reluctant to leave the house. They maybe are hypersomniac. They're sleeping too much. They want to nap a lot. They want to go to sleep early. They don't want to wake up. Or there's a decrease in sleep. So it's harder to fall asleep, harder to stay asleep, maybe not wanting to sleep. And then dramatic appearance changes are important to pay attention to. So teenagers are pretty well known for shifting their appearance, but really dramatic or extreme changes in appearance can be fairly significant. So, a lot of times that can mean maybe wanting to cut all of our hair off or dye it a really dramatically different color for like seemingly no reason. Just maybe like searching for more more control over how they look and kind of more regular shifts there. And then increases in risky behaviors also fairly common in kids with depression. So emotionally risky, academically risky, or even behavioral changes are common. So kind of always looking out for substance abuse or increase in substance use, developing attachments to people that maybe aren't safe or too fast, too quickly, and academically maybe not doing their schoolwork, not participating as much as they might normally. All kind of things that we pay attention to and could be indicating some depressive symptoms. Also just talking a little bit about identifying self-harm as well. So we want to know what to look for when we talk about addressing it. So self-harm can look also a lot of different ways with varying degrees of severity. But commonly we see avoidance of connection with trusted adults. So not being forthcoming, maybe not sharing as often as to what's going on with them, trying to be like avoidant, and an increase in irritability with trusted adults, fairly common, an increase in substance use or abuse, and some restricted eating patterns also can be very common in kids that are struggling with self-harm. More like from a body perspective, obvious cut or burn marks on the arms, legs, or the abdomen are the most common places for self-harm if we're cutting. But also excessive exercise can be a form of self-harm, just over exercising to try to manage big feelings. And then finding knives, box cutters, razor blades, or lighters kind of stashed in their spaces might be common. Another big indicator that correlates to avoiding connection with trusted adults can also be just like inappropriate or maybe like atypical clothing for the weather. So oftentimes we'll see a lot more long shirts, long pants, trying to cover marks or indicators of self-harm. A lot of times kids that are self-harming, they're trying to cover them. And so, we can see long shirts, sweatshirts, long pants, even when it's really warm out, trying to avoid any water activities, things like that. And just some statistics talking about like the importance of mental health and identifying these particular behavior patterns. So like since COVID, the World Health Organization has seen a 25% increase in anxiety and depression. So we're looking for adolescents, some of the statistics say 1 in 6 are going to be struggling with anxiety, depression, or self-harm. A BMC psychiatry study said 27% of young adolescents reported thoughts of self-harm in a 1-year period. In that same study, about 18% of them had actually attempted self-harm or suicide. So fairly significant group of for kids. In 2019, the CDC reported almost 19% of adolescents between 12 and 17 had seriously considered suicide. And then the NIH says non-suicidal self-injury is the most common in adolescents and young adults with rates of 15 to 20%. So if there's a teenager in your house or in your life, it's likely that they or someone that they know has had thoughts of self-harm or is struggling with a mental health disorder or might need some extra support. So the kind of the meat of my talk with you guys today is talking about responding to mental health concerns. I kind of grouped it out into two groups. So this is if they're not talking to you. So if they're not coming to you to talk to you about what's going on with them, and you're noticing some of the previous behaviors that we've talked about, or you're noticing significant shifts in how they're doing. The single most helpful thing that I think you can do for them is to stay calm. Kind of manage your emotional experience with your concern for them, your worry about what's going on with them. Open communication happens in safe and calm environments with adolescents. So if you're concerned and you want to speak to them and you go to them, try to manage your panic or your worry or your concern in such a way that they feel that they can talk to you without distressing you as well. Some helpful things to do that is, reaching out to your trusted support network. So that's family, friends, or professionals to process the changes that you're seeing in your teen so that maybe you can have some additional support, but that you also have a place to talk about how what's going on with them is affecting you so that when you're with them, you can just be with them, that you're not also trying to not maybe accidentally asking them to also support you in your struggle with them. Asking a lot of questions, a lot of open-ended, non-judgmental questions can be helpful if they're not being open with you about what's going on with them. Just talking to them about friends or their life or school and things like that, just kind of trying to keep it open and not judgmental. Curiosity is your friend here. So hearing from them what's going on can be really helpful. It can give you a really good idea as to what might be triggering. Are there circumstances in their life that are triggering these emotional or behavioral changes, or is it more of a mental health crisis that we're experiencing? Do we need to pull in extra support? Having this conversation in a regulated manner is going to help you have the most fulfilling conversation you can with them. So calm and curious is going to be a lot more helpful than panicked and stressed. And also just kind of sticking around them can be really helpful. So if you're noticing withdrawal, if you're noticing an increase in mental health symptoms, taking care of yourself, really helpful. Talking to trusted support systems or professionals so that you can be regulated when you're with them is going to be really helpful. But also just kind of being with them a little bit more, being in their space or inviting them into your space more often. It doesn't have to be intensely talking about what you're noticing with them or what's going on with them, but it can be like watching a movie together or, doing a chore together, helping them with whatever they're doing, or maybe trying to find something that they're interested in that you can do together, building their trust in you and your ability to be a safe and open space for them can really build the connection and make them feel more comfortable coming to you. And then responding to them if they are talking to you again, kind of staying calm, like we're kind of rationally working with them, trying to manage your own experience and your own feelings about how they're doing, especially if you feel like if they would just do something different, or if they would just try something different, or if they would, whatever, if you feel like the what would be best for them. Still trying to stay calm, regulate your emotions, make sure you're managing for yourself so you can hold space for them. And encourage some pro-social engagement. So friends, trusted adults, social involvement is healthy and good. So even if they're in trouble at home or they have consequences for some of their behaviors, pro-social engagement with their peers, with the people that they trust, is helpful from a neurochemical perspective, but also from a social and emotional behavior perspective. Also, it can be really helpful to normalize professional help. 1 in 6 folks in their age group, and really more of the data looks a little bit more like 1 in 4, 1 in 5 could use some professional help. So I'm talking to a counselor, talking to maybe somebody that has extra training and supporting is pretty normal, and something that can be really helpful in helping them feel like they can manage their life in a better way, and manage their emotional experience in a better way. There has historically been a lot of stigma. It's shifting a lot, especially with the younger generations now, but still there's some stigma of like, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with our family, why can't we figure this out? But having some extra support from a counselor, some trusted adults, even folks in some religious situations, so at our church or at our wherever you may have spiritual connections, might be helpful. Talking to our doctors about what's going on, all can be very normal. We can talk about emotional and behavioral health in a very similar way that we can talk about physical health. And so talking to folks that have additional training can be pretty helpful. And we can borrow language from when we talk about our physical health as well. And then monitoring social media can be really helpful to get a good idea about what's going on with them. So even when they're talking to you, if they're not talking to you, if you're not really sure what's going on, there's likely some indicators in their social media as to what's happening. There is truth that valuing some privacy can be helpful, but if you're concerned about the physical well-being, the emotional well-being of an adolescent, then kind of looking into what they're doing online is helpful, and you can cover a lot of ground pretty quickly if you get kind of plugged into what's going on there. So you can ask them to show you. They're maybe not open to that, then you can look yourself, just to get an idea about like what are the inputs in their life, like what are they hearing, what are they sharing, what is happening. Another thing that I talk a lot about with parents is just kind of like, what is the goal of if someone's struggling, like what is the goal? We really want to address mental and behavioral wellness when they're young, so that when they leave your house, when they're in college or when they're young professionals or they're working to build their life, that they have the skills that they need to be successful then. So when they're younger, it's a little bit smaller problems. And so we can help address how to manage emotional experience, how to manage maybe the chemical aspect of more significant depression or anxiety or even ADHD, can be really helpful so that they can learn to be successful in this environment and then move forward and be successful in their next environments. And then a really, really common conversation we have is with parents is about attention-seeking behavior. So they're worried or concerned that their child's depression, anxiety, or self-harm behaviors are actually attention-seeking, or maybe not credible or real, because maybe the problems or the emotional dysregulation in the adolescent isn't as obvious. And so it's our belief and our understanding from the literature in our field that attention-seeking behaviors are still important indicators of emotional wellness. And so if your child or an adolescent that you know is engaging in these types of behaviors, it's important to take them seriously. If they're talking about suicide, it's important to take that seriously. And it's important to not punish them, but to be open about how if an individual is struggling with something, or if they're talking in a certain way or engaging in certain behaviors, that we have to figure that out. In a very similar way that we have to figure out what's going on in our physical health, addressing emotional and behavioral health in that kind of way is also really important. Attention-seeking behaviors, we talk about this so often with families, just about how even if they are seeking your response or seeking your engagement and whatever problem is going on with them, they're showing us and telling us that they don't know how to manage it on their own. And so, common interventions to mental health concerns. There's counseling, there's school counselors at school, there's outpatient counseling with um, clinicians in the community. There is also, if risk seems to get like pretty quickly pretty high, then there's what's called intensive outpatient, which is about 9 hours a week of counseling, typically in a group format. There's many programs that happen after school. It's a little bit more intensive. There's also partial hospitalization, which is a little bit more counseling, more group activity during a week, with some medication management. And then there's hospitalization and residential care, which are typically out of the home kind of placements. We like to, and the hope is to address mental, behavioral, and emotional health when we first see it, so we can help families and kids gain skills early so that we don't have to escalate, or at least we can try to avoid having to escalate into more significant or more substantial treatment options, but the options are still there. And I'd wanted to leave some time for questions if anybody had them, just about responding to particular types of behaviors or certain behavior patterns that might be atypical. If anybody had a question. Okay.
If you have questions, you can just unmute and ask them. Okay, well, maybe no questions.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much for
course.
presenting.
Yeah, nice to see you guys. And just some information about our practice. We do counseling. We have a psychiatrist on staff who's in person here in Westlake, who sees ages 5 and up. We do neurofeedback, and then we offer psychological testing. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And those of you who don't know, Heritage has been great. They've partnered with us, and especially if you have littles, it is hard to find somebody. So they are a great resource, especially for younger kids. Yeah, and they're close and they're awesome. So we love them. So thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I just want to share real quick. We've gotten tons and tons of emails. We will post. We're not the most tech savvy social workers over here. So as soon as we get all of the speaker series downloaded and saved, we will post them on the Healthy Shops website. So just be patient with us, but we will be sharing the recording with parents. Okay, thank you. Everyone have a good day. Thank you, Betsy.
Bye-bye.